So, a quick background on Kenny. He is a sales leader at ClickUp, which a lot of you probably know is one of the fastest growing startups and just have absolutely been a complete rocket ship. And I feel like the first time I saw ClickUp was on the highway, the what's it called?
The billboard.
The billboards on the, where I was always like, wow, this company is cool enough to have billboards. Anyway, Kenny's background, he's worked at now, I think 3 companies taking them to unicorns. So he's been early sales hire at ClickUp, also Gadara, App Annie, and Yammer. So he has a lot of experience at leading sales organizations at fast growing companies. And something really interesting about Kenny is ClickUp started with more of a sales-led approach, and they've recently started implementing more of a product-led approach, and it's completely accelerated their growth. So he's excited to chat about, how he did that and the frameworks they've taken and the teammates that were involved. So it'll be a really interesting experience. So before I start probing you with questions, Kenny, I'd love to hear your background from your voice and what you've been up to at ClickUp.
Yeah, thanks, Alexa. So I've been in this kind of B2B SaaS startup space for probably about 14 years. And as you mentioned, I've worked for some really great companies. So I was an early member at Yammer way back in 2008. I was an early member at App Annie at around 2013, 2014. And then I was lucky enough to get on board ClickUp here about 2 years ago. So when I joined Yammer, I was their first SM in the company. So I interviewed directly with David Sachs at the time. And that was really my first experience into kind of freemium, bottoms up, PLG type of selling, which was really, really new at the time. But after my time at Yammer, I jumped over to App Annie, was their first enterprise lead over there. There were about 15 people. It grew to about 300-400 people in the 3 years I was there. And then here at ClickUp, I started just under 2 years ago. The company had about 35 employees when I got here. There were 3 reps. Fast forward to today, there's about 1,000 employees, and we have a sales org of about 160 people. So been around the block a little bit in terms of some of these high growth B2B SaaS companies.
Awesome. And can you talk a little bit about the transition from ClickUp sales motion? So when you first joined and how it's kind of transformed from sales-led to product-led and where you are now?
Yeah, so when I got to ClickUp a few years ago, it was definitely just a sales-led motion overall. So when I interviewed originally with Zeb Evans and with Tommy Wang at the time, it was a really good interview process. And towards the end of it, I was like, hey, can you guys show me some of the metrics under the hood? Because I wanted to see where their traction was. And they sort of revealed to me that they were getting around 10,000 signups a day through their freemium and their free trial motion. Wow. So when I came on board, I started kind of preaching around how this was sort of the future of the company. We needed to focus on operationalizing it and starting to work to monetize those users into revenue for the business. So we first started off by launching sort of a single PQL back in like early 2021. It was a firmographic-based PQL. And we really didn't put a lot of effort into it, to be honest with you. We just launched one trigger. And we really just focused more on our sales-led motion, but we had that initial trigger that was looking for executives for large companies. So we were looking primarily for basically executives in large companies. So if a VP of Walmart signs up, we wanted to know. And so we did get a little bit of revenue from that particular PQL, but that's really all the work we put into it. We didn't really start to focus on it until the end of 2021. So we put together a tiger team of executives, and we kind of built out this really large model that was, focusing on propping up 5 to 6 lead triggers, operationalizing it, enabling the sales group, and really starting to bring that product-led motion into focus for the company. So we've been working on it for about 6 months now. We've had pretty good success overall. It's still a work in progress, but so far we've successfully moved from sort of a pure sales-led to like a hybrid product-led sales-led motion.
Yeah, I have so many questions. So when you first joined and it was completely sales-led, do you mean that sales teams were just running after potential customers that have never heard of ClickUp or used ClickUp? How did you kind of get the buy-in to say, wait, there's a huge missed opportunity here. There's 10,000 signups per day. We should put the time in to be more product-led.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the buy-in was sort of generated a couple of different ways. For one, we built out a model that was really comprehensive in nature, and it really showed that through just propping up a series of lead triggers and validating the data and building out a playbook that focused on, user value and, writing sequences that were going to generate responses from users as opposed to sales leads, that we could actually get there. My experience at Yammer, my knowledge around what we did at App Annie, what I know from what they did over at Dropbox and Slack and some of the big names in this space was also further validation that this basically can be done. It was pretty common knowledge though here at ClickUp that we knew we needed to go after this. We just really hadn't put a plan together to go after it. So once we got that plan in place and we had kind of that cross-functional executive team buy-in, we really knew that we were going to go after this full time.
Mm-hmm. And then who was the one that was leading the charge? And then what other teams and roles were brought into this Tiger Squad to make it happen? Yeah,
so it was definitely me leading the charge at first, but we put together a Tiger team. I think it's Justin Hyatt, who is our head of XDRs, David Zhang, who is one of our RevOps analysts, and then our head of analytics, Mark Stone, and then our head of revenue strategy, Evan Morgan. So the five of us were sort of the Tiger team that was trying to get it done at the time. And we had to basically spend a lot of time coming up with hypotheses around personas and figuring out which ones made sense. And then we spent a lot of time validating those personas, leveraging Mark's team and running a large series of queries basically all the time. Then once we had a validated persona or a PQL that we felt was going to produce quantity and quality, we then worked to operationalize it with the group. So making sure that those leads were efficiently distributed to the sales reps. And then I partnered with Justin on the tail end, building out sequences and playbooks and really kind of shifting the culture away from pure sales led to, hey, these users just need a little bit of help. They need a little bit of value. These are basically bottoms up motions that you guys need to work, and really educating the sales team on like the differences in the two motions and why this is going to benefit the company.
Got it. Very cool. And so all of you had this great squad of people from a variety of different roles looking at this from various angles. And you said, okay, step one, what are some PQLs or personas? So I assume that started with everything as simple as the VP of marketing at Walmart signed up, or VP at Walmart signed up, all the way to more complex PQLs. And how did you go through the process of, so I heard you say you were testing PQLs and then operationalizing them. Can you walk us through what that actually looked like and how long that took to do that?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. That's a very
yeah. I was gonna say you glossed it. You made it sound easy. Tell us more.
So we started with three buckets, three data set buckets, which was fit, intent, and usage, right? And we made the mistake out the gate of trying to blend those data sets together to make more dynamic and complex personas. But after we realized how difficult it was to create weighted averages for those different data sets, how do you weight an executive for an enterprise company versus MB, and how does that affect the scoring of intent and usage thereafter? We realized that it's better to focus on pure play lead sources and really stack rank a high, medium, and low for each one of those data sets to create those PQLs. So we went through, that took us a little bit of time to figure out. And then in terms of operationalizing it, we came up with sort of a proprietary 6-step process internally. It was like a persona development cycle. So focus primarily on persona definition, then validation through building a data profile. And then we had a process from plugging in and making sure the lead automation and routing was efficient. And then we had a Tiger team, another Tiger team that would work on the playbooks and the sequencing, which consisted of reps and other sales leaders. And so the first trigger that we popped up took about 6 weeks, but then the next one took about a month. And then the last 3 or 4 that we've done only take about 2 weeks. So it's a pretty efficient process right now.
We have 2 different questions. Hugo, do you want to ask your question?
Out of curiosity, one of the things that you said was oh yeah, we want to stack rank different lead source, within our PQLs, we want to stack rank different lead sources. So I understand how that works for MQLs, whether they come from referral partners or whether they come from a different website or from TechCrunch or that kind of thing. We kind of have the same system, but I'm kind of wondering what that means for a PQL. For our PQL, all of our lead sources is just new trial or in product or that kind of thing. So
yeah, so you're just asking where the top of funnel was, where those PQLs are coming from in general?
Oh, got it. So I guess the clarifying question here is, let's say someone signs up for the platform, right? So someone signs up for ClickUp. Then even on top of that, you're ranking where the top of what that top of funnel looks like. You're ranking whether they're coming from, whether they're coming from an organic search or whether they're coming from inorganic or social or that kind of thing. Because for us, that lives separately. So this is a new concept to me.
Yeah, great. It's a really good question. And to be honest with you, we're actually building that component out right now. So the data for us is 2-dimensional, which is really fit and its usage, right? We look at fit and intent, but intent is also usage to some degree. They're looking at when they run into paywalls, when they visit our pricing page, Usage has to do a little bit more with how they use our core competencies as a company. So workflow management, task management. So we don't actually look at the top of funnel source. That said, we are in the process of deploying right now a marketing automation tool so we can add marketing data to the mix to make the way that we look at PQLs three-dimensional nature, which to your point is probably going to open up additional pockets of PQLs, just identifying people that are all over our marketing online, but they may not be using the product, or all over our marketing, and we can confirm they're looking at our pricing page. That in and of itself could generate additional PQLs for us. So we're getting there right now.
Sounds complicated, but thank you.
Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two questions. Actually, so the first one is, so I'm an individual contributor right now, and I've been learning more about product-led growth in like the last year. And as someone who's been in IC, it just seems like a no-brainer that any sales rep would want to join a PLG company, all things being equal. But I'm curious to hear, since you've seen both sides, what is something I'm overlooking here? Like, what's the downside of being a sales rep at a PLG company?
Yeah, it's a good question. Our transition for our sales reps was not easy, and it's still a work in progress as well. But it's fundamentally different to have a bottoms up and then a tops down motion versus traditional leads, which are just tops down only, right? We know for a fact that our bottoms up motion makes our deal cycles about 2x longer, but we do know that we can drive higher ACVs and higher LTVs with those customers. So from an individual contributor perspective, you should know that you're going to be managing a wider book of business with a slower subset of deals. So it's just going to take you longer to close some of those deals, but you're going to generate happier customers that want to spend more money. And you need to prioritize user value over basically like a traditional SaaS motion, which is like, did you get the demo? Are they qualified? Did you get technical solutioning? You need to be focusing on, again, driving value at the user level and asking for introductions and getting really at the epicenter of what their pain points are and solving those with the product.
Okay, it's good to know. And going off that, then it leads right into my second question is, how does the hiring strategy change when you move from a sales-led to a product-led?
That is a very good question. And
yeah,
that is,
so like, what's the ideal hire in both of those? Maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, so we went, when we launched product-led, just to be clear, we had already 80 reps. So we had to deploy product-led at scale out the gate. And today we have 160. And one of the biggest difficulties we had in terms of, creating that shift in the sales culture was the fact that we had hired 80 tops down reps, most of which only a few had some basic bottoms up selling. So from a hiring perspective, there's really only a handful of companies that have done this in the past, but we've noticed that when we do talk to reps from Slack or from Dropbox or from like Twilio or from like Datadog, for instance, they do know, they get it. They get that they're reaching out to users and they're driving value with those users to generate the tops down motion. So if it were me, I would be highlighting, I'd really create a list of like the top 20 PLG companies, and I would be recruiting from them if it were me. That's what I would be focusing on.
Okay. Yeah, got it. I guess if you are a PLG company, you want somebody like that, because is it so much to say that people from a sales-led, what is it that maybe a sales-led person on both sides, right, wouldn't want to join PLG? Is it like, oh, I don't want to do smaller deals, I just want to go after the whales? Or is it on the hiring side of PLG, are they saying, I don't want the sales-led person because maybe they're more salesy in nature? I don't know. Like, how do you think about that from both sides as to why it might not be a good fit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I think it's a little bit less about PLG experience and tops down experience. It's a little bit more about hiring people that have hunger and grit and rigor, and they want to learn and they want to grow. The way that we tell our sales team is that you're effectively learning a new sales methodology. This is going to make you better reps. Like, this is something you can take to your future employer. This is something that you can master. This is something, we're going to basically teach you guys kind of a cutting edge sales methodology. And so we're looking for people that are interested in learning, interested in growing 1% a day, interested in people that want to develop their skill set and learn this new motion. Because it's very, very hard to hire people that actually have the experience. So it's more about hiring people that represent our core values and characteristics.
I appreciate it. I'll let someone, I know there's a lot of other questions. I don't want to take up the
all good. I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
It's a great topic, and I'm really happy we were able to get there. But we do have a lot of questions. So Tejas, do you want to ask yours? I think this might be more of a marketing question, but we can try.
Yeah. I was just curious how ClickUp was getting those 10,000 people, like free trial signups, just a strategy, if you have any idea.
Yeah. So ClickUp was very, very good about growth early. They did a lot of marketing. They did a lot of promos, but they had a fully functional free version of their product. They had a free trial version of their product. So any growth strategy that you read about on these, on Alexa's site and other sites, ClickUp had done all of them before I even got here. So their funnel was very, very wide. They were just getting a lot of signups right out the gate. I didn't do any analysis on who those signups were when I first started here. What I can tell you about our signups today is that mostly it's coming through referrals, word of mouth, guerrilla marketing, and some of the branding that Melissa's team is doing on the creative side. Most of it is coming from that right now. But it was pretty apparent to me my first day on the job when they said we get 10,000 signups a day. Right away, I was like, you guys realize that product-led sales, product-led growth is basically going to be a main strategy here. Like this is going to be a key growth driver for our company within a year max. So
cool. This is also marketing related. George, do you want to give your question?
Yes. Big fan of ClickUp. I just love it. What's the balance between marketing in automated emails versus sales emails that are hopefully, tailored and personalized and coming from a human? And the last part of that question is, when do you know it's time to send either or?
Yes, super good question. Something that we are definitely still working on right now. Some of the plans we have for the future of the program is definitely around supplementing through automation, specifically around communication, dynamic in-app messaging, to lighten the burden for the sales rep and deliver more right leads. What we do know, though, is that the sequences that we do have in place and the ones that we started with definitely do not perform as well as customized messaging. So it's important to train the reps on how to prioritize the PQLs, highest value versus lowest value. And the ones that are highest value, they should always be writing customized messaging that highlights specifics about their usage, specifics about the other users, really letting them know that I'm a partner. I'm here to support you guys. We will drive value on this instance of our product. You just jump on the phone and kind of talk with me. So the other thing that we do know is that phone calls are, 10x more likely to drive a conversion than an email. So if you actually have a phone number as part of your sign-up flow, or you have multiple opportunities where the user can input their phone number, a phone call will generate, like for us, at least 10, 12x higher conversion rate just by simply making that first touch of phone call. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, it sounds like, there are these plays and ultimately we need the data to tell us when and where.
Yeah, and it just depends on your model. If you're doing free trial, if you're doing freemium, depends on if you're targeting activation-based PQLs versus lifecycle PQLs. So just the messaging all really depends, but definitely would focus on prioritizing your PQLs, and the high value ones should get a lot of attention.
It makes a lot of sense. Then using the data to be customized. It all comes back to the data about the customers and how to use that to inform your next step. I love it. Ashu, I like this question a lot.
Yeah. Hey, Kenny. Yeah, I was just wondering, I'd imagine a lot of people come to ClickUp as a user from that B2C perspective, right? So how do you go from B2C to end up to B2B? So I'd imagine someone maybe from a bank comes in and they use ClickUp, but you see that they're high value to convert their engineering team or ops teams to use ClickUp. How do you manage that flow from user to decision maker?
So you're asking about the flow from user to decision maker for a small company, borderline B2C. Is that about right?
Mm-hmm.
So our PLG motion doesn't really focus on them too much. Our PLG motion is primarily focused on right now is generating leads that we can validate through enrichment, our SMB, mid-market, or enterprise accounts. So the sales team has limited bandwidth. And obviously PQLs with 10,000 signups a day, we could dial it up to 10,000 leads a day if we wanted to. We keep it dialed down and have them focus primarily on high value PQLs. So the sales team doesn't spend a lot of time working those types of leads. That said, we do have a pretty rich self-service motion that's supported by the support team itself, helping to drive those users to conversion on their own accord through plugging in their credit card. And that part of the business is almost as big as the sales assistant side of the business as well. So it's a very successful self-service motion as well.
Okay, that's cool. So basically driving low value leads to self-serve, and then eventually when they reach a point, then sort of growing that account, I guess, and as you go along, right?
That's correct. It's a guided user experience that encourages that individual to plug in their credit card. Where of course with the sales team, we're focused on land and expand, like, hey, invite these 3 people from your team, invite me to your director. Let's get a conversation going about this line of business. It's definitely more of a hard expansion motion, where self-service is like, hey, you've hit these 3 value points. You're clearly getting value. why don't you plug in for $9.99 a month and you can keep using the platform.
Get to those directors from those high value leads, like to the 3 people, right? What would that look like? Would you be mapping out the org and asking them for like an intro, or would you be adding value and saying, okay, here's how I can help you, and if you get me to your director, I can also help them out? Like, what would that look like?
Yeah, so that is basically, you're asking about the bottoms up selling motion, which can be very, very complex. It's definitely a delicate balance of support versus sales. You definitely can't have reps going in there and hard selling. These are users, they're not expecting to talk to sales. So you can't go in there and hard sell. On the other end, you can't have reps doing 5 to 10 support phone calls that lead nowhere. So it's definitely a balance of like being short time to value to build rapport with that end user, and then leveraging that rapport to get introduction or inviting more users. So you're sort of like manually creating that groundswell motion of adoption. And then once you reach sort of a threshold, that's when you can start to ask for introductions to decision makers. So if they actually do roll it out to 10 or 15 people and they're solving a pain point that they've described to you, then you can go back to the 5 or 6 people you've got rapport with and be like, would your director be interested in purchasing this for all 100 people on your team? And that's how we're generating those conversations right now.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yep. It's honestly, the bottoms up motion is long. It's complex. I did my best to provide a synopsis, but it's a big topic, to be honest with you.
So a question around data, because a lot of this depends on data and having it available at the right place, to the right people. What does your tech stack look like that allows the data to flow, especially around like the intent and the usage?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was a major project for us for quite a while, was that we were delivering PQLs based on a scoring mechanism, right? We were saying that this user had high intent, but that's a black box for the reps. They don't know what high intent is, right? There's thousands of features within ClickUp. So we had to find a way to create consumable data and deliver it efficiently to the reps so we could arm them so they actually knew where to focus to drive engagement and adoption. So what we built is, we call it a global 360 dashboard. It's a one-touch dashboard that we've embedded within the opportunity and lead objects within Salesforce. They click this dashboard, and then domain pops up with all of their usage metrics across the board. So when a rep, for example, they get a lead that's a PQL, they can immediately click that dashboard and they can see engagement across the whole domain. That's being powered through Tableau, and it's integrated with Salesforce. And then the data itself is being parsed and organized through Snowflake and Segment specifically. So Snowflake captures it all. Segment goes in there and basically organizes it for us, and then it shoots over the distribution of key engagement and adoption metrics into that global 360 dashboard, basically in real time. So anytime they click it, they get the most up-to-date metrics itself.
Great. Thank you for that.
Was that helpful?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we're trying to figure this out for ourselves on what this looks like. So we use different tooling. We don't have Tableau yet. And I'm trying to figure out how to get this into Salesforce, because that's the common platform through which you can actually share this with the sales reps. Yeah. Not there yet.
We tried to create an app within Salesforce itself, like an analytics app. And basically that was a huge failure. It was too much work. Salesforce was too clunky. So we went the Tableau route and just built a dashboard in Tableau.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how often do you refresh the usage data?
Every time a rep clicks the button to see the dashboard, it refreshes it in real time in that moment.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Very helpful.
Yep.
How long did it take to build that out?
A while, actually. It was a while. It was one of the better projects we worked on. It was actually quite a bit of fun. But really around a solid month and a half. And then we had to drive enablement. But it was interesting because you can't expect reps to be data scientists, right? That's not an expectation. So we really had to figure out the right collection of data points, or North Stars versus constellations that prove the most value in arming the reps that could actually drive conversion. So we're actually releasing a V2 of that product here in the next couple of weeks.
That's awesome. Congrats. Yeah. Aubrey, do you want to go ahead? This is a great question.
Yes, I actually have to drop off pretty quickly, but I just wanted to say thanks, Ken, for doing this. And my question was just around the sales motion for full users. So like if you have a big account in your CRM and then there's multiple users that may or may not be associated with that account in your CRM, and they've set up maybe individual accounts and they don't know that there's someone else in the company that's using the product. How are you kind of managing that right now, or what's the play for that?
Yeah, that's interesting. So what I recommend typically is that you actually slowly introduce them to one another. So what I learned way back in the day at Yammer is that the value of an instance is exponentially correlates with the number of users, right? So if you go from 1 users to 2 users, that instance is suddenly 2x more valuable. So the more users you can get on there and tie together, the more value they're going to get from a user experience perspective. So you don't necessarily need to like write an email introduction, but you can start to tiptoe around it by saying like, did you know there's 6 other people that are using the product and they're finding value through A, B, and C? Would you be interested in connecting with them and kind of combining forces to drive adoption here? So you can kind of help them coordinate on their end by sort of getting those conversations started. And you can recommend how they can work as a group versus individually.
That's super helpful. Thanks, Ken.
Looks like one more question, Chris.
Yeah, I can come back. I'll come back on. I'm just going to post it. So Kenneth, you mentioned something earlier about the engagement strategy, right? How phone, and I agree with that. The one thing I would challenge is, or not necessarily challenge, but just think about is like a salesperson wants to get called on, but a developer, I feel like that's like their worst nightmare. So have you seen difference in persona where that outreach is more appropriate or better conversion? If you sell to developers or engineer, you want to email. If you sell to a go-to-market person, they'll pick up a phone call.
Yeah, so we definitely have like a list of ICPs, right? Ideal customer profiles by line of business. And then we've broken it down even into a hierarchy. So we know the people that are going to get the most value from our platform. And what we know is that most users that log on or try our platform, and it's the same for a lot of other B2B solutions, they're typically there for 1 or 2 things, right? They're there testing one feature that you have that they currently utilize with another solution, or they read about some use case or value point that they're interested in knowing more. So if you're reaching out to these people and you're basically telling them, I can help you configure that. I can help you set that up. I can show you how this other world-class company built out the exact same use case, you're usually going to get favorable results. People want help. People want a little bit of hand-holding. So we've trained our reps to understand that you can't go in and hard sell. You got to drive user value first. And as long as you prioritize the user's needs first, you can get past that initial support call and into more of a salesy conversation to like, you should invite more people. You should consider this for your org. Would your director be interested in talking?
Got it. Yeah. So did you ever A/B split test the conversion metrics of, all right, if what fields do we put in a form, right? Or that they need to fill out to access the product for free. So email, and then you tried phone and then you saw that. Cause yeah, I'd be curious to see, cause I'm in sales, right? I would love someone's phone number, right? But I would almost, if I was the one setting up that flow or the form and thinking about conversion metric, maybe people don't even end up signing up for my product because they don't want to put their phone number in there. So that's where my mind goes a little in the beginning parts of that journey.
You're spot on. We're A/B testing that right now in terms of how it affects sign-up flow and quality of signups. Is if we force people to put a phone number in, same to be said if it's an optional field. The one thing that I'm pressing for right now is that there's more than one place to ask for a phone number, right? People can have opportunities within their life cycle as a user to input their phone number. So we're trying to put it in more places as optional. And then the other catch-all that's smart is a hand-raising motion. We have that here. When people raise their hand and they say, I need help, I'm a free user. I've been using it for 6 days, but I can't figure this one thing out. We've basically operationalized those as leads. So we ask for their phone number in order to talk to support. And then we bring them in, the rep helps them solve that particular problem. And then we parlay that conversation into more of a salesy conversation.
Got it. What is the actual automation behind any sort of hand-raising motion to notifying the salesperson?
Yeah, good question. So it starts with an in-app tool, an in-app chat tool. You basically select that you want to talk to us live, which connects to front, then round robins those conversations to the support team. And the support team then basically reroutes conversations that have sales potential. They basically come to me and then I route them out to the sales reps directly. So we've trained the support team on how to sort of lightweight qualify those CSLs into leads. And then of course we have a playbook for CSLs for the reps once they get distributed out.
Okay, it's front though. Okay, that's interesting. So front.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question. I'm curious, like this has been a lot of effort over the past year almost, or past 6 months of figuring out, how do we really make this transition? Are there any metrics or results that you can quantitatively prove that this was the right decision for you?
Yeah, definitely. I can give you some secondary metrics. ClickUp's very specific about what we can share and what we can't.
Yeah.
Well, we took it into basically like a low 6-figure run rate for the company to a high 7-figure run rate for the company in about 4 months.
Wow.
So pretty phenomenal growth overall. It is our predominant lead form. So we get more PQLs than any other lead type. And it is our second largest source of sales assisted bookings. So it went from basically kind of a rag'em tag'em, small 6-figure business to now it's the main ethos for the sales culture. It's got an executive buy-in, as you know, from chief growth officer, our CFO is getting involved. Like it's definitely moving into our primary growth engine as a company.
Congratulations. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's been a good run so far.
It's proof point that it's worth it to put in the effort to do it. I'm curious, if you looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
Oh man. Definitely quite a few things. I think definitely would have worked to like adjust the team culture a little bit earlier. Like even without the resources that we have now, we definitely could have laid out the cultural foundations, like helping people understand like user value and working with users and creating that bottoms up swell, that groundswell motion. We definitely should have gotten data in front of the reps sooner so they could have a higher competency level with it. They're doing great, but we could have started that process earlier. I don't know, like just in terms of making data more consumable for the reps. I mean, I could go on for days. We've probably made as many failures as we have successes, but the fact is that we just have a really great team working on it, and we got executive level buy-in. So it's, we solve problems as quick as we create solutions, which is great.
That's awesome. And you learned a ton. So when you go implement product-led sales at a bunch of other unicorns, you'll know exactly what to do.
Yeah, at least I think so, right?
Yeah. We have time for one more question. Before I ask my questions, I'll pause for a second. Any other questions? So what's next for ClickUp in terms of what is top of mind for you for your product-led sales strategy?
Yeah, so we broke it up into 2 phases. We're just wrapping up phase 1, really. We're moving into phase 2. Phase 1 was like validating it, laying out the plumbing and electrical, right? Getting like the basics of the data architecture down, making sure we can operationalize it. We're sort of moving past that phase. We're now trying to make sure that we're connecting sort of like the head of the dragon with the tail of the dragon. So we're getting the growth team, the marketing team, the product team, and the sales team all aligned around kind of a cohesive, holistic strategy. We're starting to tiptoe into PLG for the enterprise. We're getting that strategy together. We're obviously modernizing our tech stack. Trying to think what else. Oh, and like I said before, we're focusing on scalability of the program. So looking at automations as a way to supplement for certain parts of the process. So stuff like that. We're really trying to move it into a world-class program, something that you guys talk about on here in the future. So
that's awesome. Well, this was great, Kenny. I learned a ton. I know this was rapid fire questions. So I really, really, really appreciate that. This was awesome. I mean, you're a living example that product-led sales, when implemented correctly, is extremely beneficial for an organization. And we've learned a ton from what you've done right and what you would have done differently. So really appreciate you coming on here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, and it was good seeing everyone. Thank you again. And we'll see you at the next AMA.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.